There was a great variety of landing craft on D-Day, each playing a specific role. There were mechanized landing craft (MLCs), landing craft support medium (LCSMs), landing craft personnel (LCPs), assault landing craft (ALCs), as well as fast motorboats. All these types were constructed at the railway works at Eastleigh near Southampton. Before the war, Eastleigh developed as a railway hub, building and maintaining locomotives. But as D-Day dawned, there was a need to build craft that could run up onto the beach. Therefore, landing craft were flat-bottomed, and many designs had a flat front, often with a lowerable ramp rather than a normal bow. This made them difficult to control and very uncomfortable in rough seas. The control point was normally at the extreme rear of the vessel, as were the engines. Two young apprentices, aged between 12 and 14, heat rivets in a furnace of an LCA, which was the most common British and Commonwealth landing craft of World War II, and the humblest vessel of all in the Royal Navy on D-Day. Its primary purpose was to ferry troops from transport ships to attack enemy-held shores. The craft derived from a prototype designed by John Thornycroft of Woolston, Hampshire. During the war, it was manufactured throughout the United Kingdom in small boat yards and furniture manufacturers. Typically constructed of hardwood planking and selectively clad with armour plate, this shallow draft barge-like boat with a crew of 4 could ferry an infantry platoon of 31 with space to spare for 5 additional specialist troops to ashore at 7 knots. Men generally entered the boat by walking over a gangplank from the boat deck of a troop transport as the LCA hung from its davits. When loaded, the LCA was lowered into the water. The LCA had a long central well section fitted with 3 benches, 1 centre, 1 each port and starboard for seating troops. The side benches were covered by the top deck. The well was divided from the bow by a bulkhead fitted with 2 vertically hinged doors. This pair of forward-opening armour plate doors led to the ramp, which was lowered and raised by a simple arrangement of pulleys and a wire. The landing craft support medium Mark II and Mark III were used by the British forces at Normandy. The crew was Royal Navy with Royal Marines to operate the weapons, 2 half-inch Vickers machine guns, and a 4-inch mortar to fire smoke shells. The need for a purpose-built landing craft was identified as far back as the First World War during the Gallipoli campaign, when boats appeared like sitting ducks to the enemy artillery. A prototype motor landing craft was built and first sailed in 1926. To prevent fouling of the propellers in a craft destined to be beached, a crude water jet propulsion system was devised by White's designers. A Hotchkiss petrol engine drove a centrifugal pump, which produced a jet of water pushing the craft ahead or astern, and steering it, according to how the jets were directed. Speed was 5 to 6 knots. Later craft were powered by a single gill petrol engine. Royal Marine James Baker, DSM, remembers the scene. We were all in a sort of quarantine, kept separated from the rest of the country. Although we were not allowed to write letters home, we were all given postcards that had set options to tick. These were along the lines of "I am well," or "I am wounded," or "I need socks," that sort of thing. I know that Southampton water was a mass of shipping, and it never ceases to amaze me how the secret was kept. The weather was consistently grim, so I suppose the enemy couldn't imagine we would be daft enough to invade in such conditions. On the 3rd of June, 1,800 Canadian and British Royal Marine commanders were embarked in Southampton. Within 30 minutes of arrival, disembarkation began, as a first wave of assault troops were dispatched in LCAs to what would become known as Juno Beach. None of the assault troops realized that they were part of an armada of over 4,000 ships supported by airborne landings. The D-Day Story Collection at Portsmouth has a white ensign from a landing craft support medium, number 79, which took part in the D-Day landings on Gold Beach. It is inscribed with the signatures of the crew members: Instone, Brown, Griggs, French, Dixon, Walker, and Blower. The D-Day Museum has tried to trace the signatories, but failed to get a response.